Here at the Dallas Scottish Rite Cathedral here in downtown Dallas, Texas. Structure was built in 1902 and was built by Sam Cochran, was the mason, a prominent businessman here in Dallas. There's actually a statue of him right over here. And why are we here? You know, this is a film that is about the Council for National Policy. Well, many of the high-ranking Council for National Policy members have been Freemasons. Of course, we know Tim LaHaye, who took the original funding from the Hunt Oil Brothers to start the group, the Council for National Policy, also 33rd degree Freemason, Knights of Malta members. And it's really prevalent of how these groups operate in secrecy, and they operate behind the guise of the secret societies. Now, we can't go in there. They won't let us in, of course. But I have heard about things that they do have inside the building. And very interesting that they have, there's actually a bowling alley in there, and they also have basically a skylight. And basically what this is it's a skylight in the ceiling, and it shows all of the constellations. And it is basically a star map, and it shows basically the proximity of Sirius and other things. We know that the star Sirius is very important in Masonic lore. And in Volume 2 of The Secret Rite, we'll definitely go in more detail about how the connections tie back to the secret societies and really what the overall agenda is. Because if you're talking about a group that is involved with a military-industrial complex, involved with wars, groups like Blackwater, controlling religions, you find that secret societies such as Freemasonry are often said, oh, well, it's just a Christian-based group, nothing more. And then you find out that they're worshiping things like Baal and Jobulon and the rest of this. So we find that's anything but the case. But very prominent and very interesting that here in Dallas, Texas at Dealey Plaza, which subsequently we were going to go shoot footage at, but apparently they're doing construction in Dealey Plaza, so you're not able to get to, of course, the giant Masonic obelisk with the eternal flame on top, which subsequently was put there before the assassination of Kennedy. But we're not able to get there, but that also was the site of the first ever Masonic lodge in the entire state of Texas, where now Dealey Plaza is located, even long before this structure. But right across the street, there's actually a lodge, a giant lodge, which I guess subsequent other lodges have meetings at and whatnot. They're across the street, so we're going to go over there, and we're going to talk about some of the symbols on the outside of that building as well. But this is a very interesting building. If you just Google Dallas Scottish Rite Cathedral, you'll find it. And this definitely would be where a lot of these elites, top executives, and a lot of these people that we've talked about and have exposed that are in the Council for National Policy would be coming and having their rituals and everything else. So hopefully at a later date we'll be able to get inside this thing, but as it stands right now, we're just here on the outside. Okay, all right, so we're across the street here now at the Dallas Masonic Lodge, Masonic Temple. And across the street was the Dallas Scottish Rite of Freemasonry Cathedral, of course, that we just came across the street from. Get a shot of that again. There's the perspective of that from across the street. Very interesting. You can see the, well, I can see from the glass here, I can see the Azabeth so below, Hermetic Seal of Solomon symbol. I'll go ahead and get a shot of that as well. But what I wanted to show you here is very interesting. You've got the 4 symbols of masonry, and essentially these represent 4 different types of masonry. The most important one is the one at the very, very top, which of course there's lots of contention as to which one that is or what that really represents, but it is a Masonic symbol. I believe it is a York Rite of Masonry symbol, but the very interesting thing about it is the fact that Tim LaHaye, founder of the Council for National Policy, one of his books, and many books that he's written, as well as the Left Behind series, he also wrote a book called Babylon Rising. And in one of his books, on the very front of it, you can go and look through the library or your local bookstore and find it. He had that very symbol right there at the very top of it. Now, you know, if you research these groups, you'll find out that these people are nothing of what they say they are. They aren't Christians. They all have ties that go back to the Vatican, that go back to the Knights of Malta, and these people are engaging in the modern-day Crusades. This is what is all the wards, Blackwater, all of this stuff. It's all about these modern-day people who have basically passed these traditions down to a very small few through time. So, you know, here we are, not too far from Dealey Plaza, not too far from where the parade route went through, and this is the hub and the mecca of the secret societies in this town. And many of your oil magnates and whatnot, I'm sure, if we had a members list of who has been inside this building, I'm sure it would be very interesting. And I'd like to know who was here and who was in this building on November 22nd, 1963. But again, lots we can prove, lots we can't prove. But the most important thing, as always, is to look into this stuff for yourself, ask the hard questions, and don't let anyone discourage you from looking at any point of information.
The Republican National Committee is meeting in Washington today and tomorrow, and a CBS News survey finds the party leaders exuding confidence about winning control of the House next year. We talked with 159 of the 168 GOP committee members and officers. To a question about the impact of the conservative, religious-oriented moral majority on the elections, about half don't expect it to make much difference. Of those who do, most think it would help Republicans. The moral majority is holding a training session in Birmingham, Alabama now. Ed Rabel went there for a report on this new political force.
I'm Walter Ferner. I'm an attorney from Bessemer, Alabama. I'm here because I'm interested in getting more Christian, good moral men to run for public office.
I'm a wife, mother, and grandmother, and I'm here to elect more men to office who stand on the traditional values.
They did not go away after their success in the 1980 elections. It just encouraged them. They are religious, conservative, mostly Southern, and steadfast. They still want conservatives in, liberals out. They still want America to be like them. And they are here because Moral Majority is holding a seminar to teach them how to have their way in 1982.
I'm Ken Scott. I'm pastor Joy Baptist. I'm up here to learn how to get some more soldiers lined up for Jesus.
Since its beginning, under preacher Jerry Falwell's leadership, the Moral Majority claims to have mobilized millions of conservative Christians to work for so-called pro-God, pro-family policies and politicians.
Our task as a Moral Majority organization is not to Christianize America. It's to bring about a moral and conservative revolution in our culture and in our society.
In 1980, they were the difference between victory or defeat for many candidates. In Alabama, they helped elect Albert Lee Smith to Congress and Jeremiah Denton to the Senate. Here, they are showing just how easy that is to do. The Moral Majority contends conservatives won 27 congressional races by 4% or less and lost 15 races by the same margin.
Congress is the key. If we have enough strength in Congress, we can change judicial policy or bureaucratic policy. If we have enough strength in Congress, we can change foreign policy or domestic policy, economic policy or social policy.
And then there's that tricky question about how to deal with the press.
Now, many in the media regard you and me as illogical, inarticulate, Neanderthal jerks who dress accordingly in Hart Schaffner and Goodwill clothes. You may like polyester and leisure suits. Don't wear them to interviews or news conferences. Also, for heaven's sakes, don't wear white socks and white belts.
You have to begin now. If you're looking at 1982, if you're not looking at what's going to happen now, you're not going to be in there when the time comes, and it's that simple.
Their simple idea of good versus evil is the basis of their politics. It leads to charges that they are forcing America to conform to a single standard of sexuality, morality, religion, and ethics. But that doesn't stop them from organizing like zealots for next year's campaign. Ed Rabel, CBS News, Birmingham.
White House Press Secretary Jim Brady still hospitalized.
Now back to the economy. The Reagan administration is currently looking at a number of methods for fighting inflation, including a return to the fixed gold standard. Today, the members of the U.S. Gold Commission met and decided only that they won't be able to decide by the October 7th deadline set by Congress. No wonder, because it is a highly controversial question. And tonight, economics editor Dan Kortz has this special assignment report on the pros and cons of back to gold.
For most of this country's history, Americans could trade in their paper money for gold. That promise was printed right on the bills. If citizens thought the government was issuing too many dollars, they would demand gold for them and threaten to deplete the national stockpile. So the Treasury couldn't simply print all the money it wanted. But when the Great Depression hit, some economists blamed a shortage of money and purchasing power. So President Roosevelt in 1933 took the U.S. off the gold standard and left it up to the Federal Reserve Board to control the money supply. Today, many experts blame the too rapid growth of money for runaway inflation. And Louis Lehrman, a member of the Gold Commission, insists the cure is a return to the gold standard.
Under the gold standard, you know, a loaf of bread, a 1-pound loaf of bread, cost the same in 1900 as it did in the time of George Washington. The price level showed no long-term terrible inflation like that of the last 10 years.
But most economists disagree. They point out that prices may have ended up at the same place, but they went up and down a lot in between. Opponents of the gold standard also argue that over the long haul, production of gold will increase too slowly, so the money supply won't be able to grow enough to let the economy expand at a healthy pace. Backers of a revived gold standard counter that the total supply of the metal increases at about 2% a year, almost exactly as much as money can grow and still avoid inflation. Opponents further claim that in the short run, big gold producers like South Africa or the Soviet Union could flood the market with gold. Then the Treasury would have to buy it to maintain the official price, and all those new dollars would generate inflation. Backers of gold say nonsense. They say those two countries' total annual output amounts to less than 1% of the stockpile, not enough to have any impact. Opponents then ask, how can we set the correct price for gold so that the government isn't forced either to buy or sell huge quantities? Backers answer, announce 2 years in advance that we're going back on the gold standard, and then the free market will show what the proper price should be. Opponents point out that there are now an estimated $1 trillion US in existence, and only 264 million ounces of gold in the government stockpile. So it would take a gold price of $3,800 an ounce to redeem all of the dollars floating around. Backers respond that as long as dollar owners know that they can trade them in for gold, they won't do it, because gold-backed paper dollars are much more convenient to hold than gold itself. The Gold Commission will be debating all those arguments in the months ahead, and its report could have an important impact.
The Reagan administration will take the work of the Gold Commission and then build upon that to establish for themselves a position of our administration.
But most of the 17 members are skeptical about going back to gold, including Henry Wallach of the Federal Reserve Board.
I think that we're going to arrive at the conclusion that it can't be done, but perfectly willing to discuss it.
The overwhelming majority of economists are also opposed to returning to the gold standard, so the odds are clearly still against it. But the idea is known to have a strong emotional appeal for President Reagan, so it can't simply be written off completely. Dan Kortz, ABC News, Washington.
Leukemia in Utah. Businessmen have been saying for decades now that the federal government wastes billions of dollars each year. Now, a study out today by business executives reports that hardly any company could survive if it were run the way the government is. And as Chris Wallace tells us tonight, it suggests ways to save hundreds of billions of dollars.
More than 160 business executives looked into government spending, writing 47 reports with almost 2,500 recommendations. The group proposed huge savings of $424 billion over 3 years and said more than 1/3 could come from cutting waste in federal programs. Industrialist Peter Grace chaired the panel.
The government is run horribly. They don't have any information. It's all raw data. Nobody ever analyzes it. It's run horribly.
The panel recommends bring federal retirement plans in line with private plans, savings $58 billion. Repeal the law requiring the prevailing union wage for federal construction projects, savings $5 billion. Require the Pentagon to buy spare parts competitively, savings $7.3 billion. And cut waste in federal food assistance, $6.7 billion. A labor leader said the business executive shared the president's views.
There's an anti-government mood, there's an anti-worker mood, and that certainly was reflected in the makeup of the study commission itself.
The businessmen said Congress is a center of waste with its pork barrel projects. One senator said businessmen don't understand politics.
When you start telling Congress that they should act objectively or responsibly without considering the politics, it's probably not going to happen.
When they see they're heading for $1 trillion or $2 trillion annual deficits, they're going after everything, including the kitchen sink.
The panel opposed new taxes, and the president apparently agrees. A top official saying there's a growing sentiment here against any big tax increase in the new budget. But I'd say Mr. Reagan is considering another commission to study taxes. Chris Wallace, NBC News, at the White House.
Funding from the Hunt Oil Brothers to start the group, the Council for National Policy, also 33rd Degree Freemason, Knights of Malta members, and it's really prevalent of how these groups operate in secrecy, and they operate behind the guise of the secret societies. Now, we can't go in there; they won't let us in, of course. But I have heard about things that they do have inside the building. And very interesting that they have, there's actually a bowling alley in there, and they also have basically a skylight. And basically what this is it's a skylight in the ceiling, and it shows all of the constellations. And it is basically a star map, and it shows basically the proximity of Sirius and other things. We know that the star Sirius is very important in Masonic lore. And in Volume 2 of The Secret Rite, we'll definitely go in more detail about how the connections tie back to the secret societies and really what the overall agenda is. Because if you're talking about Texas at Dealey Plaza, which subsequently we were going to go shoot footage at, but apparently they're doing construction in Dealey Plaza, so you're not able to get to, of course, the giant Masonic obelisk with the eternal flame on top, which subsequently was put there before the assassination of Kennedy. But we're not able to get there. But that also was the site of the first ever Masonic Lodge in the entire state of Texas, where now Dealey Plaza is located, even long before this structure. Right across the street, there's actually a, here at the Dallas Scottish Rite Cathedral here in downtown Dallas, Texas. The structure was built in 1902 and was built by Sam Cochran, was the Mason, prominent businessman here in Dallas. There's actually a statue of him right over here. And why are we here? You know, this is a film that is about the Council for National Policy. Well, many of the high-ranking Council for National Policy members have been Freemasons. Of course, we know Tim LaHaye, who took the original, a group that is involved with the military-industrial complex, involved with wars, groups like Blackwater, controlling religions. You find that secret societies such as Freemasonry are often said, oh, well, it's just a Christian-based group, nothing more. And then you find out that they're worshiping things like Baal and Jobulon and the rest of this. So we find that's anything but the case. But very prominent and very interesting that here in Dallas,